Hello Ascenders, and welcome to my Tournament for Competitors video. I foolishly named the other video Everything You Might Ever Want to Know, and as soon as I finished it realized, whoa, there is way more to know. So let's jump in and learn some new stuff. Alright, so this video is all about leveling up your competition. So if you have been to tournaments before, or if you're looking at going into tournaments and wondering, how do I succeed at tournaments? How do I become that person who is scoring a lot of points or earning a lot of medals? This is for you. Alright, so you want to place on the podium. You want to get that bling. And here's how we do it. So anybody who's done sports or is familiar with the Olympics or things like that are going to understand this intuitively, but only the top 3 in a particular division are going to earn medals and place at a tournament. Now this is going to be true for each event. So if you're competing, say, in 3 events and you place in 2 of those events, then you're going to get medals for those 2 events. Also, if you're enrolled in the leadership program, you will also earn points at a tournament for each event that you place in. So again, if you compete in 3 events and you place in 2 of those events, then for those 2 events and your particular division, you're going to earn points for that tournament. So if you earn enough points in a particular event in a particular division, you're going to find yourself in the state or world rankings for your division and event. Top-ranked competitors can also earn championship titles. So here's a review of our traditional events. So we've got forms, weapons, combat sparring, and sparring. Now traditional events are much more competitive because they're easily understood. These are the things that everybody's always doing, and so when they say, oh yeah, go do my form, I get that. Go do sparring, I get that. So these are the things where everybody's going to jump in. So as a reminder, the physical ring is going to be 5 by 5 meters at most tournaments. There's going to be 3 judges, a timekeeper, and a scorekeeper. Each event each ring will have up to 16 competitors. They try to limit that, but that's kind of the cutoff. In most events, if they get up like 14 to 16 competitors, they're going to split that ring into 2. You'll still have those competitors all being in the same division, but they're going to compete in different rings. So when we're talking about ring and when we're talking about divisions, they're usually the same thing, but they're not always the same thing. The division is all the people of a particular age and rank and gender that are competing against each other. And the ring is the competitors that are physically present in a particular ring. So a ring can run multiple divisions simultaneously. So occasionally if you have a division or like 2 or 3 divisions that only have 2 competitors or 5 competitors, they might say, okay, this 5 competitor division is going to go in the same ring with this 2 competitor division, so you'll have 7 bodies in the ring, but the 2 and the 5 are not going to be competing against each other. And as always, you want to be aware of your surroundings, who's in your ring, what are they competing, what events are they competing in, and you want to stay inside the ring because stepping outside the ring is generally frowned upon. All right, so forms competition, we've got extreme levels of competitiveness because everybody does forms. It's the first thing that everybody signs up for, it's taught in all schools, and it's a required event. So there's a low threshold to entry. When I say required, there are people who don't do forms for whatever reason, but generally speaking, if you're going to do other events, you're going to jump in and do forms. Winning is all about practice and polishing those facets of your diamond. So the better you are at your form, the better your competition is going to be. And when I say that, what I mean is memory is a component of forms. The hand positions, the foot positions, the stances, all of these things are going to be components that you can practice to make your form better. And as a pro tip, we really want to say improve your stances. This is probably the place where most people fall down in form, and generally speaking, a lower stance is better. This is a picture of Mrs. Morrow doing a rear stance, and I would say as a judge, her stance could be even lower than it is, especially for a black belt. Lower stances tend to be a very high visual cue for the judges that you have a high level of competitiveness. So if you can make your stances lower and keep your posture nice and good, that's going to be something that's not easy to fix because it takes a lot of stamina to hold your stances that low, but it's simple as a concept to understand how to make your stances lower. Let's talk about judging. On traditional forms, the 3 judges each have separate jobs. Judge A, who sits on the left side, is the foot judge, which means that they're looking at your stances and your kicks. So if you're kicking nice and high, they're going to like that. If your foot position for your front kick is hitting with the ball of your foot, they're going to like that. If it's hitting with the toes, they're not going to like that. If your stances are nice and wide, your feet are parallel when they're supposed to be, that's great. If you're standing a little penguin-footed, then Judge A is going to mark you down a little bit. Corner Judge B, who sits on the right side, is going to be looking at your hands and your strikes, so your blocks. So if your wrist is nice and straight on your knife hand strike, they're going to be happy with that. If your hand looks like a fork hand or a spoon hand instead of a knife hand, they're not going to be happy with that. If you're supposed to be hitting midsection and you're hitting high section, then they're going to mark you down. If you're not doing good reaction force, those are all things that the Judge B is going to be looking at. And then the center judge is looking at everything overall. So if you are doing great stances and great punches, Judge A is going to, or sorry, the center judge is going to be more happy with you. Now, the thing that differs is that if you are hesitating, it's obvious that you're forgetting part of your form, or you leave out moves, that's really center judge territory. As long as all of your hand and foot techniques look awesome, even if you forget some things, Judge A and Judge B shouldn't be marking you down. That's really where Judge C or the center judge would come into play. Now, each of the judges is going to throw a score from 0 to 9, though really only the center judge is likely to give you a 0, and that would be in a case of if you were like going halfway through your form and you had to stop and like restart your form, or if you couldn't get all the way through your form, then overall that looks pretty awful. But if the moves that you were throwing looked really good, then you should get pretty decent scores from Judge A and Judge B, but the center judge will throw a 0. But in any event, when they combine their scores, they're going to score up to 27 points. Now, one thing to keep in mind is when you're doing the competition, the judges will not throw any scores until the first 3 competitors have gone. Now, this gives them a baseline for the ring. The goal is not to compare anybody against some arbitrary external perfect standard. The goal is to compare everybody to the other competitors in the ring on that day. So they call up the first competitor, they excuse them, they call up the second competitor, they excuse them, they call up the third competitor, and then they line all 3 competitors up and they have the first one step forward. Then the judges each throw their score. Then they have that competitor step back, second competitor steps forward, they throw their scores, step back, third competitor steps forward, they throw their scores, step back, those 3 are dismissed. Now the judges have in their mind, well, these 3, we had one who was the best, one who was in the middle, and one who was on the low end. Now we're going to fit all of the other competitors in the ring that day into spaces either above or below or between those competitors. Now, a lot of judges have their own way of breaking that out. Some judges always are going to throw like a 7, a 5, and a 3, so that there's room in between for students, for competitors to kind of fall into the spaces between them. Almost nobody's going to throw a 9 if you're in the first 3, because somebody might be better than you. So they might throw an 8, a 6, and a 4. Something like that. Or if 2 competitors seem to be really close, they might be like, okay, I'm going to throw an 8, a 6, and a 5. And so then they're going to work around those numbers to give scores out to the other students who are competing that day. All right, sparring competition. Competition is going to be very high in sparring because most competitors do sparring. This is taught in all schools. Again, it's kind of a required event in that with the forms and the sparring being a package, you're paying for it anyway. So most people are going to look at that and say, well, you know, if I'm paying for it anyway, I'm going to do it. It has a low entry threshold because most people know how to do it. If they're doing sparring in their class, they've already got the gear and all of this kind of thing. The thing that makes this slightly less competitive is that you've got some people who are injured and so they're not going to spar, or some people who just don't like the sparring experience and so they're not going to spar. But most people are going to be doing sparring, so the competition is very high. Winning here is all about timing. We have a thing that we like to say, speed beats strength, but timing beats speed. So if you can learn when to throw your techniques, you don't have to be the fastest competitor in the ring. You just have to know timing. So one of the things, the pro tip here is improve your confidence. So being able to feel confident in the ring is really going to be a benefit to you, because those people who are not feeling confident aren't going to be able to, we like to say, control the ring. So if somebody is controlling the ring and the other person is reacting to them, that person in control of the ring is much more likely to be successful. Combat sparring competition is high. That's because many competitors do it. Now, it's lower than sparring because it's not taught in all schools. It's got a moderate entry threshold because you need the combat stick and you need to practice and you need to learn strategies, because the strategies in combat sparring are significantly different than the strategies in sparring. However, there is a fair amount of overlap, and the combat stick, for example, isn't that expensive. At our school, it's $45. So if you've already invested in the sparring gear, that extra cost isn't that big of a deal. But not everybody's got that, and so not everybody does it, so the competition is slightly lower. We talked about timing last time. It's true here as well, though your timing has to be even more precise, because while somebody throwing a round kick at you is going to be relatively slow, swinging that stick can be incredibly fast. And so the people who are good at this tend to be very, very good at it. So, pro tip, improve your combos. Make sure that you know how to block and riposte or counter attack as soon as you've blocked. Make sure you know how to block and then do a fanning strike, so you're not having to load to your shoulder and throw the block and then reload to your shoulder and throw the attack. Know how to make those almost a single strike. So the block and the strike happen just instantaneously, one after the other. So that's really how you make this competitive. So in judging sparring and combat sparring, there's a few things you need to know. The judges are going to stand in what's known as the triangle. So the center judge is going to be across the ring from the scorekeeper and the timekeeper, and the corner judges will start off beside the scorekeeper and the timekeeper, so that the three judges are in a triangle. Their goal is to see as much as they can see, but seeing it from different points of view so that they can be as fair as possible. You may have heard me say before that it doesn't matter what you think happened, it matters what the judges see and what points they call for that. So a few things to know in sparring and combat sparring. The head is worth 2 points. The body is worth 1 point. Now in sparring, you kick the arm, you're going to score no points. In combat sparring, you hit them with your stick in the arm and you're going to score points. Now there's bonus point areas and there are illegal areas. The neck is always illegal. Below the belt is illegal in sparring, but not combat sparring. The back is illegal in sparring, but not combat sparring. So the only illegal place for combat sparring is basically hitting them in the neck. In sparring, it's basically you can only hit them in the chest, or the sides, and the head. So punches to the head are illegal in sparring. There's no stick butts, So in combat sparring, so you can only hit with the padded end of your stick. Things like that are important to know. And then jumping will give you a bonus point. So a jump 360 hook kick to the head right off of Jumbi and C-Jack will earn you 3 points in a sparring match. So you may only be 2 seconds in and you've scored 3 points because you did this incredible intimidating kick. Now your opponent has to score 5 points. You only got to score 2 to win the match. So this is something that I've seen happen before, and it's a really impressive strategy. Whereas in combat sparring, you do a jump headshot, you're going to score 3 points, but you got to get to 10. So that cushion is there to really make combat sparring competitive without making it too fast, because the points rack up really quickly in combat sparring, and so they want to make sure that the match isn't over too quickly. And I've seen people come back from a deficit of 4 or 5 points to win a match. So having the stamina to keep going is really important here. Now, when it comes to calling points, any judge can call break. And so typically what's going to happen is a judge will call break, and then the center judge will say judges points or judges scores, and they will throw up a hand with fingers telling whether they thought the person scored 1, 2, or 3 points. Now, the corner judges are going to have flags. They're going to have a stick with a red flag on one end and a white flag on the other. So there's always going to be a competitor that is the red competitor and the competitor that is the white competitor. And they're going to have a little ribbon that they tie onto the back of that competitor. So when they call points, the corner judges will hold up the end of the stick corresponding to the color of the competitor that they thought earned those points. And they will hold up points and point their finger with the point, or their hand with the fingers extended for the points will be pointing in the direction of the competitor that they thought scored those points. The center judge will not have a flag, but will just hold up hands with a number of points and point in the direction of the competitor that they thought earned the points. And then the center judge will look at what hands have been put up and will say, okay, they make the judgment of this many points is going to be awarded to this competitor. And then the scorekeeper will shout out, okay, that many points. So for example, if the center judge calls out, all right, 2 points red, the scorekeeper should click 2 points for red and repeat 2 points red, so that the center judge can hear that it has been registered. Another thing that can be thrown as a hand gesture is a judge can cover their eyes with both hands. This means that they didn't see anything, and so they take themselves out of the equation for the calculation of points. Also, the judge can cross their fists low by their belt, and that would mean that they saw a block, so they would block any scoring of points, either because they thought that no points were scored, or they thought that, oh, there might have been some contact, but it wasn't a quality of contact that I would score, that I would award points for. So in that case, they don't remove themselves from the equation. They're simply voting that no points be assigned. And so in cases of 3 judges, wherever the majority exists, those are the points that are going to be assigned. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but we'll get into that in a little bit more detail in another video. All right, so I think I said sparring 2 minutes, 5 points, combat sparring 2 minutes, 10 points. So you've got the same amount of time, but you are going to rack up a lot more, or a lot of points much more quickly in combat sparring. Weapons competition has a moderate level of competitiveness to it. And this is because only some competitors do it. It's really not taught in all schools. It has a higher entry threshold because you're going to need a weapon. You're also going to need to create or learn a form depending on whether you're a color belt or black belt, which we'll get to in a second. And you're going to need to practice that form, either the one that you made or the one that you need to learn. Winning really is all about presentation because the judges don't know necessarily what you're going to do. So a pro tip here is know how to use your weapon. One of the things that I hear complaints all the time is that a competitor will come in, they'll do a lot of tricks with their weapon, but they don't actually do many strikes, so they're not communicating that they understand the purpose and the use, the utility of the weapon, and they really want competitors to show them, if I'm using a bow staff, why did I pick a bow staff? Show me what striking with a bow staff looks like. Yes, I know you can make all the pretty twirls and everything, but bow staff is different than a nunchuck. Show me why you picked this weapon and that you know how to use it. All right, weapons competition. There are a lot of different weapons in the ATA, and here's a selection over here on the side. So you can use stick, and sticks can be single or double. You can use commas. Commas are a double weapon. Nunchucks can be single or double. There's even a cane. There's a Chinese broadsword, which is a one-handed sword. There are katanas, which are two-handed swords. Bow staff. I've even seen somebody do a double bow staff, which is pretty amazing. But in any event, there's a wide range of things that people can do. If you are a color belt, you do a 30-second freestyle. You get up, you bow in, they say your time begins now, and you just have 30 seconds to show off the cool moves. Now, there is some talk that this is going to change in the future, but for now, this is what it is. Black belts, you must do the official ATA form for the weapon that you have chosen. So if you're doing commas, you do the comma form. If you're doing bow staff, you do the bow staff form. Nunchuck, you do the nunchuck form. Now the bonus here is that when you're doing freestyle, the judges aren't going to know what you're going to do. So you have to be able to block. So if you guys are theater people, you know about blocking. You want to block so that the judges can see what you're up to. When you're doing the forms are just, the weapon forms are a lot like the forms that we do without weapons. There's going to be movement away from the judges and toward the judges. But again, the judges know the moves you're going to do, so they can anticipate what's coming. All right, so when we're talking about the color belt weapons forms, we're talking about an overall score from each of the judges. So Judge A is overall, Judge B is overall, center judge is overall. Now I made sure to make the pictures a little bit different here because we're looking at the same thing, but the point of view is always going to be different. Since the judges don't know what to expect, they're going to have a pretty subjective way of looking at it. Some judges will judge you more on your stances. Some judges will judge you more on what your hands are doing, the intensity of your face. Some judges are really well versed in weapons, and so they're going to judge you on the quality of your technique and the complexity of the moves that you do. So it's really up in the air what the judges know. You can't necessarily guess that unless you know those judges really well. Similarly, scores are on a scale from 0 to 9 points. Which is going to give you a combined score of 0 to 27. But again, you rarely are going to lose. You're rarely going to see a 0 unless something goes very, very wrong. So in a weapons competition, where you really lose points is if you drop your weapon. There's an automatic 1-point deduction, and if you don't pick up your weapon correctly, there's an automatic 1-point deduction on top of the first point deduction. So if you ever drop your weapon, remember you go down to one knee and you pick it up with 2 hands. That's the proper way to pick up your weapon before you continue with your form. So because there's no predetermined form, there's really no reason for a judge to say, oh, well, you didn't do your whole form. You got lost in the middle, unless you're really showing that you got lost. So they don't know what form you're going to do because you created this yourself. Now with the black belt weapons form, that's different because there's a prescribed set of moves, so they're going to know what's coming. In the color belt form, it's different. So you really want to make sure you control your facial expression and you stop when you're ready to stop. So moving on to the creative and extreme events. These are much less competitive overall because there are fewer competitors participating. However, it can be more intense because the ones that do it are much more competitive. So if you find yourself in these events, you will probably know the other people in your event ring or your division. Well. You'll probably get to know them really well if you don't know them already. When I was doing a lot of tournaments, I did creative and extreme weapons. And yeah, there was a group of about 6 of us. We weren't always at every tournament, but I got to know everybody because they were in my division. And so we were always competing against each other. So there's going to be creative forms and creative weapons and extreme forms and extreme weapons. And we'll go into all the details in just a second here. Creative forms competition is moderate. So some competitors are going to do this. The big thing is it's not taught at all schools. So there is a higher entry threshold because you're going to need to compete in your traditional forms, and you're going to have to create a form and you're going to need to practice it. So not all schools teach this. The schools that do, usually it's going to be in a special curriculum like the leadership curriculum. So the number of competitors in the ring who are doing this event is going to be relatively low. Now, because you get to create your own presentation, you have to make sure that you really show off what you're doing. As you'll see here and throughout these slides, winning is all about presentation. So if you're going to throw a kick, you want to make sure that you chamber that kick nice and tight, and that the time that it takes you to execute that kick is super short. But when you get to the extended kick, you hold that for half a second so that you can show off your foot position, so that you can show off your balance. So you chose to put this move in your form. Show them that this move is awesome and that you really know what you're doing. So in the creative piece, you can do traditional Taekwondo moves. So all the kicks and blocks and strikes, all the punches, you can do any of those in any order that you want. What you can't do is a cartwheel or a ninja roll. You can't do any aerials, backflips, things like that, handsprings. None of that stuff is allowed in the traditional creative piece. So that's what makes creative different from forms, because you're putting the moves in the order that you want, but that separates creative from extreme is that you're not able to do any of that acrobatic stuff. So the pro tip here is show off your techniques. So make sure that you show that when you do your punch, it's a nice, awesome punch. The hands are in a really good position. The wrist is straight, those sorts of things. Creative weapons competition. I'd say the competition is low here. Relatively few competitors do the creative weapons. Again, it's not taught in all schools, and when it is, it's usually in a separate curriculum like leadership. The entry threshold is relatively high. You have to compete in traditional weapons. You need to create your form and practice your form. And you generally are going to want to own your own weapon, so there's a little bit of cost involved. So a lot of people, because it's not well understood, choose not to compete in this event. So similar to last time, winning is all about your presentation. And when we do our presentation, pro tip, we want to know how to use our weapon. So if I'm choosing to use sword, I need to demonstrate that I know how to strike with a sword. So the mechanics of the sword are different than the mechanics of the bow staff. Why did I choose this weapon? I need to show that off. So when I'm creating my form, I can do any of the strikes, I can do any of the manipulations, I can do hand twirls and figure eights and all this kind of stuff, and I can put it in any order that I want. That's what makes it creative. But I can't let go of the weapon. So that's what separates creative from extreme. So if I throw my weapon up in the air in creative, I'm disqualified. As long as it's touching my body, I can do a wrist roll. I can wrap my bow staff around my wrist. It's touching my body. I didn't let go of it, even though I might not have it in my hands. It's still touching me. Neck rolls and things like this all count as not letting go of the weapon, not releasing the weapon, and so those things are all okay. But if I go out and do a presentation that's all, wrist rolls and neck rolls and shoulder rolls and this sort of thing, and I don't show off that I know how to use the weapon, there's going to be a lot of judges who look at that and go, well, yeah, it was very pretty, but you're not showing me why you chose that weapon. You're not showing me the utility of that weapon. So you want to make sure that you know how to use it. Extreme forms competition is moderate. Some competitors do it. Again, not taught in all schools, and if it is, it's usually going to be in the leadership program. It has a higher entry threshold because most people are thinking, wow, I don't know how to do a backflip, or I don't know how to do a handspring, so extreme isn't really for me. So it's going to be less competitors overall than creative forms, and the competitors who are doing this tend to be a little bit more on the talented end, but that's not always true. Here's the thing. You must compete in traditional forms. You need to create and practice your form. Winning is all about presentation, like we mentioned before, but extreme moves are not required. You could very easily make one form, compete in creative forms and extreme forms with the same form, and you might not win in creative forms because there's more people who are doing creative forms, and then win in extreme forms because you're the only competitor that decided to do extreme forms. I'm not recommending that that's how you approach this. I'm just saying that there is some strategy involved when we're talking about earning medals and points at tournaments. So this is definitely a platform for showing off your physical prowess. So if you are somebody who can do a lot of those cool moves, you can do the handsprings and that sort of thing, then this is a great place to put that in. So just remember that you don't have to do that. I did some extreme stuff, and I'm not that extreme. There's one thing that I'm pretty good at, and that's the forward roll. So that's what I did, and that made my form extreme. Extreme weapons competition tends to be low because few competitors do it. Again, not taught in all schools, higher entry threshold, must compete in traditional weapons, need to create a form, need to practice, should have your own weapon. All of these things that were true with creative weapons is true of extreme weapons. And winning, again, is all about your presentation, your facial expression, making sure your stances are awesome, your posture is great, all of these things. And as with the last slide, extreme moves are not required. You're not required to throw your weapon up in the air, but you're allowed to. So the thing that keeps most people out of this is that it sounds like it's going to be really difficult. It sounds very intimidating. And as we mentioned before, the way that people tend to get into tournaments is they kind of trickle in. You think about it like coffee. You're percolating through. So when you've got your coffee filter, it's big at the top and narrow at the bottom. It's not everybody makes it all the way through. Everybody's going to be doing forms. Most people are going to be doing sparring. A few people are going to be doing combat sparring and weapons, and then when you start getting into creative and extreme, more people tend to do creative than extreme, and so the number of bodies who are physically doing the event tend to get smaller and smaller as you go. So that's just something to think about when you're thinking about your how competitive are you and what are the things that you're good at. And like I said with the extreme forms competition, if you're good at one extreme move, that's fine. If you're good at two extreme moves, great. If you go out there and it's all extreme moves, okay, that's fine too. So it really depends on what you're good at. And if you can develop that one move that makes it extreme, great, jump into the extreme competition, add that one move to your form, and now you've got a different form. Other people are going to be super creative, and they're going to be like, ooh, I'm going to create a weapons form for creative. I'm going to create a different weapons form for extreme. I'm going to create a competitive form for creative forms, and I'm going to create another competitive form for extreme forms. I'm going to do 4 different forms on top of the form I'm learning to do in the traditional forms competition. I'm all about creating my own form. Other people are going to be like, whoa, I can do maybe one of those things. So pick and choose what you are interested in, what you're good at, and just have fun with it. So how are my creative and extreme forms going to be judged? It's going to be very similar to the color belt weapons form in that the judges are all looking at you overall, but everybody's got a slightly different point of view. Everybody's got a slightly different level of experience, and so they're going to have some subjectiveness to their evaluation of your form, whether that's creative, extreme, whether that's the weapon or just the form without the weapon. So depending on what they see, they're going to throw a score of 0 to 9, so you're going to get a combined range of 0 to 27. Again, getting a 0 is extraordinarily rare, so you're usually going to get from like 3 to 27. And depending on how many competitors there are, they'll give you higher scores or lower scores. If there are more competitors, you're more likely to see scores of like 3 and 4 get thrown. If there are only 3 competitors, they're usually not even going to throw a score. They're just going to have all 3 competitors step forward, and then they're going to point to who they think got first place. And so then they'll assign places that way. So it's a little bit different if there's only a few people in the ring. So we've talked about this before in the last video, but anybody can compete at tournaments. There are no belt or age requirements. It really is about your own personal interest in being competitive. And anybody can be competitive by really honing those things that they're good at and maybe shoring up some of the things that they're not so good at. You might remember that competitors are organized into divisions of similar ability. So one of the things you're going to want to do is get to know the competitors in your division. If you're looking to place, you're looking to get medals, that place on the podium, you're going to want to know who you're up against and what their strengths and weaknesses are. What are their goals? Are they going for world champion? Well, that's a high goal. They're going to be working their tail off to get to world champion. We call those people red letter chasers. You'll see why in a minute here. But that's somebody that if you're not as competitive as they are, you need to just understand they're probably going to be pushing really hard. And maybe they're pushing really hard in just 1 or 2 events because those are their events. So you say, okay, I'm going to maybe focus on a different event. Or, hey, I'm ready to go head to head with these folks. I'm a red letter chaser too. This is going to be the person I'm competing against. So if you know what their goals are, you know what their events are, what are their competitive advantages, do they have state or world standings? Do you have state or world standings? Are they going to age or rank out of your division? So something that I'm looking at right now is I'm getting ready to turn 50, which means I'm going to be in a different division. So I won't, at 49, I'm competing against people who are as many as 9 years younger than me. When I become 50, I'm competing with people who are as many as 9 years older than me. That changes the landscape of the competition. If I'm a 2nd degree black belt and somebody gets their 3rd degree black belt, they're out of my division. So I'm not competing against them anymore. But somebody who's 9 years younger than me, who just got their 2nd degree black belt, wow, you know, they may be much more physically capable than I am. And so there's going to be things like that that, again, are going to change the landscape a little bit. So knowing what your events are, what your strengths are, what your competition strengths are, is all going to be stuff that will play into the strategies that you develop for your goals. So another piece of the division setting is gender. We've said before, ATA does not want to see cross-gender competition. So their definitions of gender is going to be males and females. So males compete against males, females compete against females. Rank. So the ranks tend to be white, orange, yellow belts are a division. Camo through green. Purple through red, black, and then black belts, 1st degrees and 2nd degrees, 3rd degrees and 4th degrees, 5th degrees, etc. And then age. The younger ages are going to be by 2. So if you're tiny tigers, if you're 6 and below, you're typically going to be a tiny tiger, and so they all are going to compete together. However, if you are looking at the older kids, 7 and 8 is usually going to be a division, 9 and 10 is going to be a division, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 is usually a division, and then 18 through 20, no, sorry, 18 through 29 is a division, then 30 to 39, 40 to 49, 50 to 59, and so on. So most divisions are going to be broken down in those three things. So my current division is 40 to 49, second degree black belts, male. And so that's the group of people that will be in my division. It might be first and second degree black belts combined. So that's the little piece where there's a little bit more overlap. But when I age up, it will be males, first and second degree black belts, 50 to 59. So that will be my new division. So tournaments. There are three types of tournaments that we're typically going to see locally. We have Class C tournaments, which are in-house tournaments, Class B tournaments, which are kind of medium-sized regional tournaments, and Class A tournaments, which are big regional tournaments. And depending on how many competitors are at each tournament, when you earn a place on the podium, you earn a first, second, or third, you're going to get fewer points at a Class C, more points at a Class B, and the most points at a Class A, simply because the number of competitors in your ring is going to be greater. So when you're competing against two people, you're not going to earn as many points for a win as you will if you're competing against 13 people. And with Class C tournaments, you can only score 50% of your season's points from Class C tournaments. So one thing that they are trying to avoid is somebody going to, like, say your school owner throws like 12 Class C tournaments and you win every single one. They don't want you to earn a state championship based on that. You have to go out to some of the bigger tournaments and compete against a larger number of competitors for that. And so you can certainly earn points at Class C tournaments. Most schools are going to have 1 or 2 Class C tournaments a year. And then regionally, we do not have any Class A tournaments in Oregon, but we typically have 3, sometimes 4 Class B tournaments in the region. So there are 3 other kinds of tournaments to keep in mind. There's the district tournaments, the fall and spring national tournaments, and the World's Expo tournaments. So a district tournament is an invitational tournament, and our district is the Northwest District, which includes Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and southwestern Canada. Now, districts are invitational, so only the top 10 in a particular division, in a particular event, are going to be invited. And this is top 10 number of points based on other tournaments' scores. So, for example, I was invited to district champions because I was top 10 in creative weapons and extreme weapons. And so I got to go to this tournament. When you win at districts, you earn no points, but you earn a district title. Similarly, at Worlds, they have what's called the Tournament of Champions. This is an invitational for the top 10 in the world in a particular division in a particular event. Also, district champions are invited to go to this invitational. So this is only for black belts at the Worlds, at the Tournament of Champions. And so again, no points are earned, but if you get a number 1 at Worlds, you earn a world champion title. Now, fall and spring nationals are considered AA tournaments, so you're going to earn a lot more points because people from all over the country are coming. So the spring nationals tend to be held in the western part of the United States, Las Vegas, for example, here, and the fall nationals tend to be held in the eastern part of the United States, for example, in Florida. So because there's a lot more competitors, there's going to be a lot more people in your ring, and so you're going to earn a lot more points if you get a first, second, or third place. So if you're going to a regional tournament and you are competing against, 4 or 5, 6 other people, and you go to a national event and you're competing against 12 or 13 or 14 other people, then you're going to earn correspondingly higher number of points. And then the last one, the Aaa Tournament, is also held at Worlds, and this is open to all ranks, and it's considered the first tournament of the season. And so it tends to be held at the end of the World's Expo to kick off the next tournament season. So the Tournament of Champions tends to be closer to the beginning or the middle of the World's Expo, and it marks the end of the current tournament season, and then the AAA starts the beginning of the next tournament season, and they happen at the same. It's like a week-long event, and so it happens at the same event. So one season ends, the next season begins. And the AAA tournament is going to be the highest points of the season. So anybody who wins a first place at the AAA tournament is pretty much guaranteed a spot or an invitation to their districts and their world champions for the following year, because you just earned a boatload of points there. All right, so here are the championship titles that you can earn, and these go on your uniform so that you can show off to all of the other, show off to all your friends and try to intimidate your competitors. So state champion is #1 in state standings. So Mrs. Morrow is here in 2019. She actually got #1 in state standings in 5 different events. So kudos to her. District championship, again, you don't have to be #1 in the state, you just have to win at the district championship. And I believe in 2018 I was not #1 in the state, but I defeated the #1 standing, the person who had the #1 standing at the district tournament, and so I got these 2 patches on my district championship uniform. And then over here is an example of World Championship. This is Amber Smith, and she won at the World's Tournament in order to earn this world title. So keep in mind, top 10 in state standings are all invited to the district tournament. Top 10 in world standings are all invited to the World's Tournament. And then district champions are also invited to the World's Tournament. And the reason behind that is, let's say I'm the person who doesn't have a lot of money or a lot of time to travel to a bunch of different tournaments, and therefore I don't score a lot of points. Say I've got a competitor who's got a lot of disposable income and a lot of free time, and they go to like 20 tournaments all over the place. They score a bunch of firsts and seconds and thirds, and they just rack up a ton of points, and they get the state championship because they've just got so many tournaments to go to that it's inevitable that they're gonna get enough points to kind of get that state championship. Now, maybe I'm more talented or I'm more skilled, but I don't have the time and the money to go to a bunch of tournaments. So I've only gone to 4 tournaments or 3 tournaments, but I got first at every tournament that I went to, and therefore I was still in the top 10. Say I was like 3rd in the state. So I didn't earn the state championship, but I still got invited to the district championships. So now this person who went to all these tournaments gets to compete against me at districts because we're both invited, because we're both in the top 10. And then let's say I wipe the floor with this person, and so I win that district championship. Now, if I win at districts, I don't have to be in the top 10 in world standings to get invited to Worlds. Now, it happens to be that the time I did go to Worlds, I was in the top 10 world standings for the events that I was competing in, but I wouldn't have to be. So similarly, this person who went to all of these tournaments, they might be top 10 in the world standings because they're good and they went to a ton of tournaments. I also got invited to Worlds because I won the district championship. Now, maybe I didn't go to enough tournaments to earn enough points to even be in the top 10 standings in Worlds, but I was in the top 10 standings in state. I would still be invited to Worlds, and I could conceivably compete against this other person who I beat at districts again at Worlds. But I would also be competing against a bunch of other people from other states and other districts who were invited there for the same reason, because they were top 10 in world standings and they were district champions in their districts. So there's a little bit of complexity to it, but there's also some opportunities to strategize. Being in a state like Oregon, our population is relatively low, and so being able to get into the top 10 in state standings isn't terribly challenging. Whereas in a state like California, it's going to be a little bit more difficult because the population is so much higher. There's so much more competition down there. Getting top 10 in the state standings in California is going to be more challenging. All right, so that wraps it up for this video. Remember, if you want to sign up for tournaments, go to ATA Easy Sign Up. There's going to be a profile that needs to be filled out. Go ahead and do that. Remember, if you have more than one person in your family training or going to tournaments, make sure that you let us know before you sign up for any tournaments. Build your profiles at ataeasysignup.com and then let us know that you need to connect us, that you need us to connect you behind the scenes, because you'll earn yourself some discounts for having multiple family members going to the same tournament. Want to make sure that you guys get those discounts, so just make sure that you let us know that your profiles are built, and we will we'll do all the connecting behind the scenes. All right. So that's it for us. I'm Nathan Morrow for Ascent Martial Arts, and remember, we change lives.